When Reality Hits is the theme of New York Encounter 2021. And the purpose of our webinar tonight is to introduce the theme through poetry. So first we will introduce the theme to all of our attendees here. When Reality Hits. In 2020, reality hit us hard. First, the pandemic overturned our daily routines, jeopardized our health and economic security, and took away lives and livelihoods. It filled our days with uncertainty and discomfort, often leaving us feeling helpless and afraid. Then the killing of George Floyd shocked our nation and prompted widespread social unrest, a desperate cry for justice. Finally, the election plunged the country into such divisive acrimony, fueled in part by the media, that we are seriously worried about the future of our democracy. Reality is still hitting. It has elicited the best in us, an urgency to respond, admiration for the caregivers, solidarity with those in need, and for the victims of injustice. But after so many months, tiredness and a sense of rebellion are sinking in. Ultimately, the events of the past months have exposed our radical neediness and debunked our illusion of control. A deeper, truer core of our humanity is emerging: expectancy. Expectancy of a vaccine, of the end of racism, of political change, or of something else, more radical. It is this expectancy that pushes us toward the future, igniting the desire to continue to walk. We want to move forward, but we do not want our experience of these events to be muddled by ideological interpretations. We do not want to waste the sorrow we have suffered and the lessons we have learned as if they had been in vain. Can you keep moving? I think there's a little, Simon, there's a little part on the next page. There it is. What happened in 2020 indeed changed and is still changing us. What is the nature of this change? What are we looking for? Will life ever be the same? Can this change be a milestone in the journey of life? Okay, so with this in mind, all of our poets tonight have been asked to reflect on this theme. And we will begin with the lovely Angela Alimo O'Donnell, who is our guest judge. And can you put her bio up there, Simon? I'm just going to read Angela's bio. Angela Alimo O'Donnell, PhD, is a professor, poet, and writer at Fordham University in New York City, and serves as Associate Director of Fordham's Curran Center for American Catholic Studies. Her publications include 2 chapbooks and 6 collections of poems, most recently Andalusian Hours, a collection of 101 poems that channeled the voice of Flannery O'Connor. I think you're going to read some of those today, right, Angela?
I am.
Okay. In addition, O'Donnell has published a prize-winning memoir, Mortal Blessings, a book of hours based on the prayer life of Flannery O'Connor, The Province of Joy, and her biography, Flannery O'Connor, Fiction Fired by Faith, was awarded first prize for excellence in publishing from the Association of Catholic Publishers. Her new critical book on Flannery O'Connor, Radical Ambivalence, Race and Flannery O'Connor, was published by Fordham University Press in 2020. And Angela was the winner of the 2019 New York Encounter Poetry Prize. So, Angela.
Thank you, Rita. Thanks for that kind introduction. I'm honored and delighted to be reading with you all this evening, previous winners of the New York Encounter Poetry Prize and new winners as well. I'm honored to have served as judge this year. It was a privilege and a pleasure to get to read so much good work from so many fine poets. And now it's wonderful to be able to celebrate with you this evening and to get our reading started. I've chosen 4 poems to read in keeping with this year's theme, When Reality Hits. Reality, as we know, takes many forms. It hits us on the micro and the macro levels in our daily life. This year, the trifecta of the coronavirus, the racial justice crisis, and polarizing political division have catastrophized our lives in innumerable ways. At the same time, we are dealing with smaller personal crises within our own communities and families. So I thought I'd read 4 poems that explore these different kinds of reality and different possible responses to them. The first 2 poems are from my recent book. Oh, there's a question. Can we see Angela full screen, please? Which I think is what we were planning to do with each poet. So that's a good idea, along with the readings. The first 2 poems are from the book that Rita just mentioned, Andalusian Hours, which came out in 2020, that fateful year. It's a collection of 101 poems in the voice of the great American Catholic fiction writer Flannery O'Connor. O'Connor is in many ways a fitting figure to contemplate at our present historical moment. As many of you know, she lived and wrote during a time of crisis, the height of the civil rights movement in the South during the 1950s and 60s, and during the Cold War. She also was forced by circumstance to watch the great crises of her era from the sidelines. For the last 13 years of her life, O'Connor lived on a farm called Andalusia in rural Georgia. Diagnosed with lupus at the age of 25, she was forced to leave her burgeoning career as a writer in New York City and live at home where her mother could care for her. She lived in many ways like a secular monk or a consecrated nun. She rose each morning, said her prayers, attended early mass with her mother, and then came home to write for 2 or 3 hours, sacrosanct time. It was then that she thought about the events of the world and wrote story after story after story about what happens to people when reality hits. COVID-19 has forced many of us to live as O'Connor did, like monks or nuns, exiled, quarantined, shut up and away as the world's crises unfold around us. One of the few things that we could do about them, about these workings of the world from the safety of our homes, is to write about them, and so we have. The first poem that I'd like to read is about the first personal crisis that young Flannery O'Connor had to endure, the death of her father when she was 15 years old. O'Connor was very attached to her father. He was her favorite parent, and they shared a special bond. He appreciated her oddness, her offbeat sense of humor, and the fact that she wasn't a typical proper Southern girl. And one of the great sadnesses of her life was watching him gradually decline in health as he suffered with lupus, the same disease that she would later suffer and die of prematurely at age 39. Yet nothing could prepare her for the reality of his death. The poem, Flannery's Conversion, which I think Simon is going to put up on the screen while I'm reading, the poem Flannery's Conversion begins with 2 epigraphs, all of the poems in the book, except for 2, to start with an epigraph from Flannery's writings, and then I supply the poem. It begins with 2 epigraphs. The first is from one of her journals, and the second is from one of her letters. The poem, as is the case with all of the poems that I'll read tonight, is a sonnet. The first epigraph comes from the journal that was recently published called Higher Mathematics, which has nothing to do with mathematics, in which Flannery says, "The reality of death has come upon us like a bullet in the side." And the second quotation comes from one of her letters in the habit of being, "I don't know if anybody can be converted without seeing themselves in a kind of blasting, annihilating light, a blast that will last a lifetime." Flannery's Conversion. I felt the first blast when my father passed out of this life into another. My face flushed hot and my young body shook like a bride's, the sheer shock of losing that man to eternity. I felt death's black breath in my ear, hissing his dark song. I knew I was alone, despite my mother. She couldn't save me from what could and can devour me. I wouldn't look when they set him in the ground. I asked God to forgive my sins, and for a long time, prayer was private shibboleth to keep me out of hell. I loved and hated the world, stood in the light and waited. The second poem also begins with an epigraph from O'Connor's letters. It's one of my favorite statements that Flannery has ever made, as she speaks powerfully about the challenges and the obligations of living in a broken, sinful world. She writes, If you believe in the divinity of Christ, you have to cherish the world at the same time that you struggle to endure it. This statement strikes me as quintessentially Catholic and something only a person of deep faith would write. It declares that the creation is good, despite the fact that it is marred by sin, and the world is full of grace, despite the fact that that grace is sometimes very hard to see. In this poem, I imagine Flannery addressing the large crises that are unfolding in her world, in her time and place, and the crises that are also unfolding in our current moment. The poem is Flannery's hard teaching. If you believe in the divinity of Christ, you have to cherish the world at the same time that you struggle to endure it. Not just love, but cherish it. This world, from the Latin caris to the French cher, meaning dear, meaning costly, beloved, meaning hold to your heart, handle with care. This world, from Old English wereld, meaning human race, meaning age of man. This world, meaning our earth and her heirs, meaning all of us here now, if you can. The serial killer, the crooked cop, the war-worn refugee at the door, the racist, the rapist, the shooter and shot, the filthy rich and the dirty poor. This world, ever ancient and ever new. Not just love it, but act like you do. The final pair of poems I'd like to read are part of a new series that I started working on last spring when the nation went under lockdown as a result of the pandemic. The collection is tentatively called Love in the Time of Coronavirus, a title stolen from Gabriel Garcia Marquez's great novel, Love in the Time of Cholera. I'm still writing these poems as we are living still in the midst of pandemic. Each of the 80 or so poems so far explores some aspect of the daily experience of living under lockdown and witnessing our world being ravaged by this terrible new disease. The first poem addresses the effect on the macrocosm, and the second one brings us back to the small, scaled down, intimate world each of us inhabits. Love in the Time of Coronavirus, Quarantine Day number 3, The Fire, March 23rd, 2020. The world is burning, and we don't have a clue how the fire started, when or where or who lit the match and held it to the kindling trees, watched the blaze blossom, set fire to the bees who were too busy being to feel the heat rising around them, devouring the flowers. It took years, not months or weeks or hours, to lay it to waste. Every city and street is a ghost town now. We haunt our own dreams. The world as it used to be only seems impossibly green, sweet and true, like a photo you took once, and now you study to find yourself, trying to lay claim to love before it went up in flame. The final poem I'd like to read was written during Eastertide. One of the readings of Easter week, as you'll recall, tells the story of two disciples walking towards the town of Emmaus. En route, they encounter a stranger who walks with them. It is the risen Christ, but they don't recognize him. It is only when they sit down to the table with him and he breaks the bread that they see God is among them. One of the lessons of lockdown for me has been that stationary though we seem to be, we're always on the road to Emmaus, plodding along, distressed by circumstance, unaware of the presence of divinity. But every now and then we stop and we realize God's been with us all along. Love in the Time of Coronavirus, Quarantine Day number 29, Our Emmaus. And I think the screen has shifted as Rita is on. This has an epigraph which reads, "And the two recounted what had taken place on the way to Emmaus, and how he was made known to them in the breaking of the bread." Luke 24, chapter 24, verse 35. April 26th, 2020, the third Sunday of Easter. You hand me the loaf, I tear off the heel, dip it in the blue dish of olive oil. This ritual performed at every meal gladdens my heart. This is the real presence of joy these days of pandemic. The world's gone insane. People are frantic. They talk of the news, the news, the news. Terrible deaths, bleak crucifixions. Lives once well ordered now lack direction. Better to sit here, just me and you, to set on our table olives and wine, to savor the taste of sweet grapes and brine, to raise our glasses and toast the poor dead, to mend the world and to break our bread. Thank you.
Beautiful, Angela. Lovely. That scene with you and your husband, I guess that is, right?
Yes,
Beautiful.
thank you.
So let's give Angela a round of applause through the chat there.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Angela, we will bring Angela on towards the end when we announce the winners of our poetry contest. So right now, we will move on to our first reader, who is the wonderful Paul Mariani. So Paul's picture come up. Did you unmute, Paul?
Thank you. When reality hits, Lord, how is it this Corona COVID nightmare still chews up half the news night after night, as exhausted doctors plead with us to stay at home? How is it those beds in the makeshift ICUs keep filling up and up and up until exhausted nurses keel over with fatigue or, worse, succumb themselves, and the numbers of the dead multiply, then rise and rise again? Oh, dear God, please help us. Please save us if it is your will. Or at least help us better understand what this thing is really all about. What is it you want us to take away from this, as the coffins keep piling up in tents and makeshift plywood corridors? We read the sacred texts and history books, searching the past and those plagues of yesteryear for what they have to tell us now. And still, here we are, a year into all of this, and despite news of this vaccine and that and of more to come, with all those vials swarming bee-like off those cold steel counters, and those FedEx trucks leaving docks and racing off with police escorts somewhere to the rescue, though not anywhere it seems near here. Still, we hold out hope that light, mehr Licht, will come again, and soon. But will it? And as the days and months roll on, and 1/10 of the promised number get their shots, and the news goes burbling on, we ponder what the new normal will look like down the line. Still, the restaurants stay closed, along with all those gathering places, bars, gyms, even schools and churches. And as we choke our words through masks, we plead, dear Lord, what shall we take away from this?
Wow, that is so beautiful. Thank you, Paul, for that. Really a prayer, really a deep entrance into your experience, and a cry. It's like a psalm, you know. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Next, we have Catherine Chandler from Quebec.
Thank you, Rita. I'm delighted to be here this evening. Reality hit me very squarely in the face in 2012 when my daughter suffered a ruptured cerebral aneurysm. And I wrote this poem afterwards, and it's entitled Almost for Caitlin, my daughter. There's 5 parts to it, but I'm only going to be reading the first and the last. The first part is titled Silverweed. And silverweed, also known as cinquefoil, is a wildflower, and in the language of flowers is the symbol of maternal protection of a beloved daughter, as its leaves will bend over the flower when it rains. Silverweed. Telephones that ring at 3 a.m. mean bad news, yet you must answer them. You lose your voice, then find a stratagem. Your shoes, your cell, your cool, your car keys, certitude. You must believe. You mustn't come unglued. Don't leave the rosary beads behind. Saint Anne, Saint Jude. You weave along the boulevards at blinding speed, and though you make a deal with God, you need to shake that weighty metaphor for silverweed or break. And the 5th poem is titled Afterwards, as in words. I gather up the get well cards and flowers and dress her in her street clothes, socks and shoes, then wheel her out into the summer air. She is alive, alive against all odds. I've chronicled her unaccounted hours, for days are things one can't afford to lose. The words tell how, with nothing left but prayer, I trusted in a surgeon's hands and God's. The little notebook, thorough, stark, exact, recounts procedures, numbers on a chart. And since the point by point is based on fact, she'll never read of daggers to the heart, or how, amid disaster, the mundane and blessed act of writing kept me sane.
Wow, that's gorgeous. And that's amazing. So
And she did come back 100%.
thank God. And that's from one of your books, Catherine?
Yes, that's in The Frangible Hour from 2016.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Our next reader from Northern Virginia, I want to say, Elizabeth Moravsky. Hello, Elizabeth.
Mute myself here. Hello.
So nice to finally see you, meet you, Elizabeth. You won first prize that 2017 with a beautiful poem about Edith Stein. And we didn't get a chance to meet then, but we finally, thank God for Zoom, right? We got a chance to meet you now.
Yes, thank you for this opportunity. I'm going to be reading the title poem from a chapbook that's just been published, and it's a memorial to my son, Alex. Unfortunately, he did not make it. And so the poem is called Still Life with Timex. At last, I am mad enough to part with the boots, surly and yellow, the laces cut. A heavy thud when they land in the bin. Maybe someone at the dump will rescue them, like soldiers in battle who steal from the dead. Surely he will walk again. I'll buy him new, unnerving the way his watch still runs, the crystal hole despite the impact. The second hand rounding the face in tiny jerks.
Oh, that image at the end is amazing.
Thank you.
See what you can say so much in that one image of the second hand rounding the face in tiny jerks. Wow. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Next, Kathleen O'Toole, third prize in New York Encounter 2017 contest. Kathleen was the first year that we had the contest. Kathleen was one of our winners, and she's been with us for a long time, 5 years. Kathleen, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Rita and Angela. Good to be with you all. I have also chosen to read a poem that comes at the theme from a moment of personal crisis, but I hope that you'll hear in it echoes of struggles we've all been through this year, particularly to find hope and solid ground in all that we've faced. It was written on the first anniversary of my brother's death, but was inspired by a powerful reflection on depression and faith by columnist Michael Gerson at the Washington National Cathedral in 2019. And I want to acknowledge that the title and several italicized lines in the poem come from his message, "When hope fails, there is love." When hope fails, drips of icicles, hours and minutes, this desolate year ticking away. We still cannot fathom, cast about for reasons or a narrative that coheres, but none quite thread the needle of my brother's despair. Do you know what day this is? Mom's voice on the phone. Of course, I tell her. And that I've heard a preacher's words confess what we could not name. Stalked by sadness, no way to will yourself out. A well-known figure with a byline called out the noonday demons Mom still can't imagine in one of her own. My own remembrance rite led me to that cathedral close, a safe place to reread the suicide notes and unsent text that begged a forgiveness from us, from God, that Kevin could not manage to pry from his own soul. For him, no way to stake your life on the rumor of grace. The very next Sunday, an echo in the priest's litany of encounters where Jesus reveals his power to see what hurts us. Blind Bartimaeus, the woman with a hemorrhage. It was the good thief whose witness I clutched to heart. Staking his life, Jesus, remember me, on the rumor of grace, that blessed assurance swift and sure. This day, how could we doubt it? You will be with me. Whatever imagined guilt or shame the thief had hammered into a millstone, absolved in that moment. Every tear, despite our unbelief and fear, wiped away. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you, Kathleen. That was beautiful. Thank you for that. The good thief, how much hope he gives to all of us. How much hope he gives to all of us. Thank you. James Davis May, another one of our 2017 winners who's been with us for 5 years, like Kathleen.
Absolutely.
Jim, are you there? There he is.
I'm here. So I wanted to thank Rita and I also wanted to thank the New York Encounter for continuing to champion poetry for these last 5 years. I also want to explain that I recently moved into this house and had nothing to do with the paint on the walls. Split pea and ham was not the color I would have chosen. Anyways, I would read a poem called Red in Tooth and Claw. Should be Red in Tooth and Claw. It was written after a series of friends passed away, but one in particular from cancer. So Red in Tooth and Claw. Even on the night my friend died, after a long illness, I won't use the word battle, but the cancer was gone and then it came back like some slasher film killer. Even on that night, the feral cat, the one that's white and fluffy and sometimes affectionate, still crossed our driveway quietly from our neighbor's pines to our rhododendrons. Even on that night, she would look for some rodent or bird to terrorize and mangle and maybe fully kill. And I, drinking and grieving on our deck, was appalled by the world and its gross refusal to stop being the world. And then embarrassed, not just by my own naivety, though there's plenty of that, but by my innate human sickness that believes we matter, that someone is listening, that civility isn't just something we imagined and don't really follow anyway. That night, I wanted everything to be better than it is. So I went to the fridge, got out the milk, and poured it into a little bowl, which I left on the porch and found empty the next morning.
That poem gives me the chills. Thank you, Jim. I wonder, if we all had that presence of mind, to pour some milk, when things are really tough, So thank you for that. Beautiful. Please read the lines in the chats too, everyone, because there's a lot of people that are commenting, and it's really great to see, and I'll mention that once again, all for our attendees and our panelists, if you want to comment, you just put on in the to line of the chat to all panelists and attendees, and you're free to write your message there. This is our way of interacting during this webinar. So thank you for everyone for participating and responding. Next, we have our first place winner from last year, the wonderful Burt Myers, who I have to congratulate because he's engaged to be married. So we're all very happy about that. Some good news coming out of the pandemic, although you swore to me it had nothing to do with the pandemic.
Not really, but thank you.
So Bert, I know I gave you a hard time about this poem, but I really had a change of heart after reading it so many times. I know you have something to say about this, so.
Well, thank you, Rita. It's great to be here. And it's nice to see so many friends here. Yeah, some people have written so much during this pandemic, and I haven't written anything, and I'm just kind of stuck. And I think when reality hits in the form of politics and the pandemic, I can't seem to write about it. I want to write about other things, and those things seem kind of inconsequential somehow. So I kind of turn away from it all. And this poem of mine is about that turning away, among other things, and about not noticing the reality right in front of us, which is a big part of what got us into the situation we're in, I think. It's called Fall Landscape. A photographer showed up at my door, dragged me outside and said, "Look at this." He pointed past my Japanese maples to the sun dropping onto the horizon. "Let me take some pictures," he said, already clicking away, "and I'll make a giant print as big as your living room, which I'll sell to you for a modest fee." I'd never noticed this particular view and agreed that I might like to see it again. "Give me some time to save the money," I said, and sent him away. Week after week, I'd cash my Friday paycheck and sneak a single brick home from the yard. I'd stash a 20 under a sofa cushion and cement that brick over the window. By the following fall, I was ready. $1,000 cash and 52 bricks covering the window on the west wall. One day the photographer returned. I showed him in, handed over the cash, and said, "Put it there." He did and left. I sat in the recliner, tipped it way back, and fell asleep staring into the sun.
Thank you, Burt. And thank you for
Thank you very much.
for that explanation and that insight.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Next, we have John Poach, all the way from Texas. Are you there, John? John is in the house. John, can you unmute? I see you're muted, John.
Yes, I'm unmuted.
Okay. John, you've been working on a lot of books, I see. You've been very busy. What's going on?
Oh, I got my coronavirus shot today, so I'm very thankful for that.
That's good. So this poem was published in First Things, right?
It was. It was. In December. All right. To Heretic Christmas. And as far as the theme goes, this poem is 2,000 years old in some ways. The reality that was then is also now. Politics is such an overwhelming part of our reality. As a poet, I try to turn away from it mostly, but it creeps in. But this is a kind of a different way of looking at authority by looking way, way back and seeing how things in some ways don't really change. To Heretic Christmas. Fear not, despite the evening's crippled shins dropping to dust again from your rooftop view, the anvil coming down upon the hammer you witnessed in your dream will be for good. You are warned like any other by the stars and distant fires, by lamp, and even by the inevitable blatant morning blue, that light will triumph. Strange word, triumph, coming from a hymn to an old Greek god of wine and leisure, the certitude and peace you cannot have because you try to stop the sun, the way that anyone might hush a child. Hush, hush. The hammer in your dream nails nothing down. Sleep, wake, choose life and not the taking. I am. Bread is not flesh and blood is not wine. Yet one becomes the other under a roof where together people feast, far off in a stable, their eyes upon a newborn lamb.
Gorgeous poem.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you for sharing that. Amazing. Okay, next, Janine from Iowa. Are you there?
Do you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks for being here.
So, should I start?
Please.
All right. Thank you so much, Rita. And again, I want to echo the thanks to the New York Encounter organization. Last year's theme was crossing the divide, and I think that's so much of what we need right now. I'll read my poem. It's called A Small Thing, and it has an epigraph from Julian of Norwich. And in this, he showed me a little thing the quantity of a hazelnut lying in the palm of my hand as it seemed, and it was as round as any ball. I looked upon it with the eye of my understanding and thought, what may this be? And it was answered generally thus, it is all that is made. Julian of Norwich. A small thing, small as a hazelnut, small as a wild black raspberry that ripens on a woodland bush, small as a hummingbird's heart beating much too fast for life. The world as we knew it has cracked in two. Borders have closed, nowhere to run. I want to go home, a voice inside cries, but no home exists where I could feel safe. No paternal hand reaches for mine. A small thing I'm asked to believe in, small as an acorn, a cottonwood seed, small as a green bloom of moss, an inchworm hanging from the sky, held in the pierced hand of a God that some blame for bringing this plague, but I imagine to be just as confounded as we. A small thing we seek after months without embraces. My feet reach out for yours. Hugs are forbidden, but we stop our walk to lie outstretched, our faces more than the requisite 6 feet apart, while the soles of our feet embrace and the clouds float above. And the human world we knew transforms faster than our feet can follow. With nowhere to run, all places the same, 2 choices, 4 walls or 1 sky. A small thing, small as a hazelnut, small as an apple seed, an ant's leg, a bee's wing, small as a virus, life's first built block, held in the pierced hand of our God.
So many lines in that poem, killer lines. An inchworm hanging from the sky. 4 walls or 1 sky. It's amazing. Thank you, Janine.
Thank you.
Next, Ned, are you there? The great Ned Balbo. Ned, can you unmute? You're mute. Ned? There he is.
Can you hear me?
Say it again.
Can you hear me?
Now I can, yes.
Okay, I have a sticky trackpad. So there are any number of comments I tried to make, my appreciation for the power of the searching questions that Paul Mariani was asking in his poem, and Burt's lovely poem, and about the photograph and suddenly being able to behold and pay for it and enjoy it. And obviously things happen very fast. And when your sticky trackpad transposes pieces of words to other parts of the page, it makes commenting kind of tough. So I just want to say I've been enjoying so many of the other readers, and thank you, Rita, for having me and for being part of this and being behind it and getting it going. And it's a pleasure to hear from everyone. And James, glad for your conversion in terms of the cat, giving them the milk and taking care of them. I should always take care of the cats. I'm going to read a poem called KT. It's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sections, and they're all extremely short. And I think as someone raised Catholic, the apocalypse has always preoccupied me. I think that when you talk about reality hitting, you're also thinking about the great sweep of time. At least I always think about that great sweep of time, the great sweep of time that rolls forward and the great sweep of time that rolls backward, all the way back to the loss of the dinosaurs, to the loss of an entire world that was remade and recreated into a world somewhat like what we know now. But through so many ages and eons, it takes so long to get there. And we have to only wonder what's going to happen in our own future. So I think that this poem may be okay for the reality hits theme for those reasons. So this is called KT, the epigraph. The impact at the end of the Cretaceous period, the so-called KT boundary, exterminated 75% of life on Earth. And that's a epigraph from someone named Robert Sanders, who in an article called Fossils Document the Hour After the Meteor Hit. KT. And there are a couple words here I'll mention. The intro is longer than the poem, so fear not, everybody. One is tektites, which are the remains of meteors, the molten fragments that they leave behind, and in this case, the meteor that destroyed life on Earth eons ago. And iridium, which is an element that's usually found in meteorites, and its presence in Earth's soil is a further testament to the destruction of one version of creation by the meteor. KT, strange rain of molten glass, asteroid rock blown up sky high, primordial fish hurled by the sea quake onto sand once breathed through gills, the shining drops that rained down burning even after they lay still. Shocked quartz and shattered shark teeth, proto-mammals petrified, foot-long feathers, fallen tektites in the filaments of gills, a terrible lizard's three-horned carcass, proof of impact, ecocide. Stellar traveler pulverized to rock dust and iridium, you made oceans rise and sway, called acid rain and darkness down, sprayed rubble, ash, and blast debris into the firestorm of the sky. Who'll recognize the turning of one era to the next? Not the living things wiped out in mass extinctions of the past, nor we who, sifting relics, monitor apocalypse. In the gleaming core of amber hangs an insect caught in flight. In the post-Cretaceous layer, ferns, resurgent, fought and thrived. Bones like pages in a journal, fossilized, give up their light. Thanks. Now,
Brilliant. Brilliant.
Trackpad will unmute me. Try to mute myself now. Trackpad, mute me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ned. That was brilliant. Brilliant imagery. Okay. Next. Oh, look who we have here. Okay, so thank you for my fellow poets for encouraging me to read this poem. This one is called The Cure. I remember early Decembers counting down the days until my Christmas gifts appeared beneath the tree. My brothers, sisters, and I would rouse our parents at 5. One word and we were off, wrecking the wrapping, filling the family room with cries of approval, stacking our gifts, soon to be modeled, played with, assembled. To welcome the new year, we abandoned our tree, entangled in tinsel, dead on the street. The gifts once beneath lost value as a secret shame grew. What I'd awaited had left me deflated. Not one gift had delivered on its promise or kept me engaged, not wanting something else, I didn't know what. And every year the same, until I came to realize it's a child's game to hope so steadily for what eventually will fail to please. Christmas 2020 promised a vaccine that will allow us to rip off our masks, to show off our mustache or lipstick, blow out candles in crowded restaurants, pant in the gym, sing in church, holler at sporting events, dance and drink with strangers and friends, sit in a classroom or gab around the water cooler, inhale without fear, exhale without guilt. Is it the child in us that will say it's not enough to have the world the way it was? Do we blaspheme? Our secret shame is a desire that wants too much, but will never ask for more. To ask is to admit we haven't found the cure. Thank you, everyone. Let's, Simon, can we bring all of the poets up on the screen? All the panelists? Is everybody up there? Yeah, gallery view. Okay. Okay, so these are all of our New York Encounter former winners and judges. And I want to thank each and every one of you for what you've meant to me over the years. When I started the New York Encounter poetry contest, when the idea came to me, what I wanted more than anything was to meet poets. And this is really a great gift, each one of you. And now we're going to meet some new gifts. Our winners, that's what everybody's waiting for, I guess. It's 8:23, and we're going to slowly bring on the winners. And I'm going to ask Angela to speak a little bit about the winners, why she chose each poem before it's read. Our third place winner, if you could bring it up on screen, Simon. He's not able to be here tonight, unfortunately. Amit Majmudar. You can see he has quite a list of poems and books, and quite an accomplished gentleman. And Angela, if you'd like to say a little bit about the Year of the Rat.
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, it's been an honor and a delight to serve as the judge this year of the New York Encounter Poetry Prize, to read so much good poetry by so many good poets. It was not easy to choose only 3 poems as the contest winners. As you might imagine, as Rita mentioned, there were over 600 entries. But the ones I did end up choosing each bears the mark of originality and authenticity. It gives us the opportunity to see the world that we are so familiar with through a new lens, and to hear it brought to life in fresh, evocative, lively language. These are all poems that sing, each according to its own peculiar tune. Amit Majmudar's Year of the Rat struck me the first time I read it, and stuck with me well after reading the rest of the poems. It is a tour de force, a crazy catalog of seemingly disparate creatures and places and objects, rats and oxen, Sinai and Eden, restaurant placemats and rose gardens, and of course, air conditioners, all brought together in the service of telling the mad, weird, wild tale of our year of living with COVID. Unified by a principle of association T.S. Eliot himself would find admirable, the poet invites us to consider the connection between all of these disparate things, these signs of the times, both our times and all times. I admire the connection the poet is able to make between the crises in the macrocosm and those of the microcosm, bringing them all together in tragic, comic, and altogether unexpected ways. I know Amit is not here, but I can only say thank you, Amit, for this poem.
And now we're going to bring on Jim. Can people in the chat are saying they can't see the poets? Jim, you're going to read this one. Can I hear your voice?
Yep, here I am. So
Can you see Jim? Can you see Jim, people, attendees? I don't see anything in the chat.
Might be a good thing
Yes,
if they
they can see you. They can see. No, it's good to see you.
All right. So I hope I do this poem justice. It's a heck of a poem. Year of the Rat. The restaurant we could not enter had the Chinese zodiac on its paper placemats. This was the year of the rat. We burrowed underground and chewed our fingernails. Were we vectors? Was that a cough? Plague rats were a thing of the past. Ships stalled offshore for 40 days and 40 nights. The captain burning with fever, with prophecy, like the bush on Sinai. We learned to trust no commandment from on high, no agency, no institute, no office oval or otherwise. The rose garden we could not re-enter was last year, Edenic with its minor brouhahas. We soaked the apple and rinsed the apple, wondering if death might still slip in. The facts were somewhere hidden in a book in the bookstore we could not enter. That summer was one long forest fire. You can end up inside a forest fire or inside a plague without entering either. The same holds true of a family. Rats had chewed a furrow in our air conditioner's foam sleeve, split open like overripe fruit, a great divide, a harrowing sure to deepen in the year of the ox yoked to the plow's tooth. We applauded the doctors who could not heal us and the statesmen who could not weld two halves of a people in love with being unwell. In the fever heat of late July, I stripped the damaged insulation and the raw, icy pipe startled my palm. I knelt and pressed my forehead to it, grateful, then sat back and let it cool the country down.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Amit, for that wonderful poem. Yes. And now we are going to bring on our second place winner, Daye Phillippo is our second place winner. Simon's looking for her.
We should have a drum roll or something, right?
There she is. Hi, Daye. Congratulations. Can you bring up the screen share, Simon? And Daye, can I hear your, oh, wait, first Angela is going to talk about Daye's poem.
Daye's poem, her marvelous poem, Missing Parts. Daye Phillippo's Missing Parts unabashedly addresses itself to the heart. It is a poem of protest about one particular way in which the pandemic and the subsequent lockdown has robbed us of what is most dear to us, the company of our beloveds. For me, the universality and appeal of the poem was immediate. I share the longing, the hunger for contact with those I love and am separated from, along with the speaker, as she ticks off her long list of the particular ways in which she misses her grandchild. I admire the specificity of the language and the absolute authenticity of the detail, describing the ways in which adults interact with small children, the naming of Duplos, Play-Doh, Cabbage Patch, Grover, and the Wonky Donkey sets us down on the floor of the playroom alongside the sticky toddler, which is right where the grandmother wishes she could be. The poem is tonally complex, managing to convey anger and almost childlike frustration and unmitigated adoration for the much-loved child. And I'd like to mention one more of the many reasons I admire this poem. As a person who is both a mother and a poet, I know from experience that writing about one's children is a challenge. I know in this poem, I admire the deft and graceful handling of this subject, one near and dear to my own heart and the hearts of many poets, both women and men. Thanks to Daye for showing us how it's done.
Well, thank you for that, Angela. And thank you, Rita, and everybody at New York Poetry Encounter. I sure appreciate it. All right. Yes, missing my grandchildren has been really one of the most difficult parts of the pandemic for me. So, missing parts. Not once during the stay-at-home order has my husband cooked pretend food for me and asked me to taste it. He has not taken my pretend order at the pretend restaurant in the toy room, nor spun the pictures of steak and carrots in the blue plastic shopping toy to tally my cart. For days, I haven't been asked to turn doll clothes right side out, soothe a fussy toddler or Cabbage Patch, change any diapers, real or pretend, or comfort a teething baby or teddy bear or dinosaur. No one has asked me to play Play-Doh. No one has banged the big plastic spoon in the oversized turquoise bowl or tossed in handfuls of invisible vegetables and seasoned them with invisible salt. No one has asked for a second banana or too many chocolate graham crackers. No one has asked me to read in my best distressed Grover voice the monster at the end of this book? Or shouted hee-haw a dozen times and worried about the donkey's missing leg and his eye patch while I'm reading The Wonky Donkey? For days now, no one has hugged my neck or sat on my lap. I am a wonky grandma, missing parts of myself. I have not walked to the forest twin line of pines out back in search of pretend adventure, or swung any gigglers on swings, or walked to the mailbox and back, a small sticky hand in mine. I have not blown out pretend candles on a Duplo layer cake of primary colors, or been asked strawberry, blueberry, or pineapple before being served a generous calorie-free portion. I have not smacked my lips and declared delicious, then asked for seconds. For weeks now, though it seems longer, and frankly, I am starving.
Beautiful. Daye, thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
that lovely poem.
Thank you.
I think we're all starving, especially after that poem. Okay, so we're going to bring on our first place winner. Drum roll, please. Do you remember his name, Simon, or do I have to say it? Okay, so Simon's going to bring him on. The wonderful Andrew Lustig, our first place winner. So, Angela.
There is much to admire in our first prize-winning poem, Invitation. First, it is an impeccably made sonnet, a form that I am devoted to, as you have gathered this evening, and so am deeply appreciative of the craft of this one. It is a classic Italian sonnet and also a risky one. The sestet of the sonnet contains 4 consecutive lines ending with the same rhyme. Yet rather than creating monotony, as one might expect, the insistent repetition of sound in more, before, core, and drawer creates a kind of incantation, creates music. And music is what sonnets are all about. The word sonnet comes from the Italian sonetto, which means little song. This is but one source of music that is in this sonnet. I could identify many more, but I won't. In addition to its craft, I admire the way the poem addresses the subject of our pandemic reality as a burden, yes, but also as an opportunity, an invitation to live more slowly, more deeply, more deliberately, a kind of kairos time. The poem acknowledges that the curse of our current era has also brought us blessing, reminding us of the truth that Flannery O'Connor reminded us of earlier this evening, that our world is broken, but it is also full of grace. The poem Invitation is an invitation to us to share in that grace. Thank you, Andrew, for this beautiful poem.
Andrew?
You're muted.
Can you hear me now? Yes, thank you, Angela, very much for your kind words, and thank the NYE for this award. I appreciate it very much. It's a very traditional sonnet, except for the rhyme scheme, as Angela said. So it's entitled Invitation. I rise, subdued by extra hours of sleep. The morning rituals are slow to start. To be the only company I keep requires that I make solitude an art. This virus, unannounced, has left the world a cheerless chronicle without a plot. A needlepoint we set aside unpearled. A reckoning with all that we are not. But it may be a beckoning to more than all the busyness that came before. A quiet voice, a coaxing at the core. The opening of a long neglected drawer where we stored keepsakes for a day of need or recompense, a time to take our heed. Thank you.
What a beautiful way to end this beautiful evening. So so thank you very much, Andrew, and congratulations, Andrew. Congratulations, Daye. Congratulations, Amit. And also big thanks to all of our panelists for coming here tonight and for spilling their hearts out. It's really a deep pleasure, a great pleasure to be in the company of all of you. And a special thank you to Simon, because God knows if I had to do what he did tonight, I would have been pulling my hair out. So you can never underestimate the value of a tech person, I'll tell you that, you know, and especially a wonderful friend like Simon, who I've known for years. And so I'm so grateful, Simon, that you're here with us tonight, all the way from California, by the way. So thank you. So now, again, let's keep in touch, please. And I also want to thank all of the poets who submitted to the New York Encounter 2021 Poetry Contest. It's always wonderful to see such an outpouring of enthusiasm and feeling and love for poetry, and a desire to share your experience. That's really a beautiful thing. So thank you all for that. I would ask now if Simon could take us to the website so we can see what's happening. Yes, New York Encounter 2021. We just want to give you just a little preview. So it's going to be February 12th, 13th, 14th, 15th, and 16th, right? Okay, and so these are some of the things that are going on here. So you just take a look, and I invite everybody to just remember it's www.newyorkencounter.org. So you can all go to this page, this program page, and you can see the great lineup that we have. These are all going to be online. So you could register, it's all free. You can attend as many events as you want. You spread the word, feel free to spread the word. And if you want to sign up for updates, right there, you can go to the page that says newyorkencounter.org/connect. So you can subscribe and put your email address in there, and you will receive updates for the New York Encounter 2021 program. So Simon, can we just go back to the panelists, the full view of our panelists? Okay, so if there's anyone that just wants to say anything before we sign off, you can unmute yourself, and if there's any last comment or anything like that.
Well, we all are very grateful to you, Rita, for putting all of this together and for bringing poetry to New York Encounter. That's really, as you know, oftentimes poetry gets neglected. It doesn't get paid attention to in the ways that news gets paid attention to other aspects of our culture. And we know that we owe that to you. So thank you so much for advocating for poetry and for poets and putting this together every year and creating a community slowly, gradually.
That's exactly right. Creating a community, which is really the desire of my heart.
Thanks, Angela.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Rita.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks to all who came to listen. Thank you. Bless you.
Take care.
Yeah, thanks to all who came to listen and to all the poets. It's just such a delight to hear poetry in these times that we're living through, and a hopeful message from everyone.
Thank you, Simon.
Thanks.
Okay, so this is not the end. This is just the preview of New York Encounter. So there's lots more to come. So I hope you'll all come back. So God bless each and every one of you.
Thank you.
Please stay in touch.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.